What happens when a teenage drug dealer, a girlfriend's abortion, and years of heroin addiction collide with the grace of God? Today on Unscripted Faith, we meet Dustin Garrett, a man who went from jail cells and street corners to Bible college, fatherhood, and frontline ministry. His story isn't clean or comfortable, but it's real, and it's proof that no one is beyond redemption.
That's the truth. Plus, Dr. Tim Muehlhoff joins us to talk about how we can disagree without dividing the church, and why learning to listen may be the most Christ-like thing we can do in today's culture war. You don't want to miss what's coming. This is Unscripted Faith. Here we go.
Welcome to another edition of Unscripted Faith. You know, I was thinking, we've got one guy coming up that has been through a war and another guy you don't want to start a war with, but it's called to diffuse them.
That's the truth.
I mean, man, there's something going on with that.
It's going to be so good today, Jay. I'm excited.
It will be. Well, he was a teenage drug dealer with a secret no one talks about. Jail, addiction, rock bottom. You'd think this story would end there, but it doesn't. What God has done with his life will leave you stunned. Buckle up. Dustin Garrett from Samaritan Ministries International joins us now. Dustin, welcome to Unscripted Faith.
Oh, what a joy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're looking good back there, man. I thought you might drop some bars for us, man. I mean, I love the setup, man. Looking good.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, if I was to zoom out, it gets less and less impressive as I go. So.
Well, that's right. We're seeing what's important, which is right in front of us. But hey, let's get right into your story today. You're the one that I mentioned that's been through the war. Yeah. And you have gone through a lot. One of the things we love about Unscripted Faith is we find out the story behind the glory. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah. So grew up near the Chicago area, a real early age, got into drugs. At a very early age, got kicked out of school, never made it really to high school. And then, was doing drugs, selling drugs, and, that led me down a road, and then eventually ended up doing heroin and did that for about 10 years, so almost a decade of my life, where I saw a lot of people go to prison, a lot of people die, and it's God's grace that I'm here sitting talking to you today.
Wow, wait a minute. You got kicked out of school in middle school?
Yeah, in 8th grade, I got kicked out, and then before I really started high school, they kicked me out again. So, yeah, I was 16 years old, and I hadn't really made it to freshman year, and then never went to high school. But that opened up all sorts of time for me to get, I think, an education in all the wrong things on the streets. So, but by God's grace, he ended up, after nearly a decade of living that life, I ended up at a homeless shelter in Illinois, where they had a long-term discipleship program for men. And it was the first time in my life that some men came alongside me and actually opened up the Bible and said, "This is who you are. This is who Christ is. This is the truth." And the truth then set me free. And I'm now, 20 years on the other side of that, and just want to, if I tried so hard for so many years to beat that addiction, they threw everything they had at me. I was in, psychotherapy, methadone clinics, jail multiple times, all sorts of counseling and everything. Nothing like that could change my heart. So it was only the love of Christ that ended up really changing me from the inside out and giving me freedom.
Well, Dustin, I want to backtrack for a second. I have a little bit of a background in addiction and things along that line, dealing with mental health. Was there anything going on in your family or in your life that kind of instigated that and perpetuated that? Or was it something, because I've seen people that have been had a great family, but still fell down the wrong path when it comes to addiction. What kind of caused that to happen?
Yeah, I think, I was born with a sin nature that was inclined towards pleasure. And so me growing up, I wanted to find pleasure any and everywhere. And I will say there wasn't, with my family. I didn't have some sort of traumatic, thing growing up. I will say that when I was, 15 years old, my girlfriend had gotten pregnant. And, about 15 years old, I don't know anything about being a father. And remember ending up in her basement with my parents and her parents talking about what should be done. And the big lie at that time was that if we were to have the child, it would ruin both of our lives, you know. And so the decision was made for her to abort the child and for me to pay for it. And I initially thought that that would bring some relief, because I was scared about the idea of having a kid. But then after the abortion happened, and I remember getting a phone call from my girlfriend and her describing how terrible it was and the cold instruments that they used, and it didn't bring relief. In fact, it brought just misery, because it was just heaps of guilt and shame around that. And after that, I will say things got worse. So that was instead of it ruining our lives having a child, actually, I would look back, and my girlfriend later on lost her life to drug overdose, and I ended up, going, to jail and ended up in a homeless shelter. So I will say that that was a decision looking back that was a kind of a fork in the road of my life, and yeah, so that was a decision though that a lot of people will say that was our parents, made us do that. I'll tell you though that my heart was to do it. I was not, innocent in that situation. But I wish at that time I would have had some real godly people around me telling me the truth about how children are a blessing, giving me an option, giving us some options for resources. And that's kind of what, my message is today, to definitely encourage folks to not believe the lie that children will ruin your life, In fact, it's the opposite. I have two wonderful kids now that God has blessed me with, and they bring me maximum joy.
Wow. So yeah, Dustin, share with us what you have lived through, you are now helping and finding deep purpose in for others.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sold out for Jesus now. There's no doubt in my mind he's the one who changed my life, and so the least thing I can do is serve his people. And with the experience that I've had, I feel like there's one lie that I see out there a lot is that men have no voice in the conversation about abortion or about children. Or I see on the other side, the voice that men do have is very harsh. It can be very harsh and very abrasive. And so I'm trying to encourage, that men are responsible for this. Men need to lead in this. Men need to teach young men how to love women, how to cherish them, how to honor them. And for us as husbands and fathers, we need to model that for young men who are right now just taught that women are just objects. And so that's one big thing I think right now is to really make sure that we are helping our young men and showing them how to love and cherish women. And because the opposite end of that is to use them and put them in a situation where they find themselves with child, and the man is totally encouraging or distant from encouraging abortion or distant from them after that. And so I would right now, I never dreamed that I would be a husband. I never dreamed that I would be a father. I never dreamed I'd be in ministry. Work at my local church. I also work at a place called Samaritan Ministries International, which is a healthcare sharing ministry, which I never thought I would end up in the healthcare world. And how does that work? What's the connection there? But the joy that I get is that Samaritan is a healthcare option that doesn't fund anything like abortion. And so I get to see God's people using their funds towards helping one another instead of helping fund things like abortion, and that gives me a great amount of joy. It's an option that a lot of people don't know exists, that there's an option for their health care that aligns with their biblical values. And I am so glad to help others discover that. And I'm really glad to get to help young men just in my local congregation, and also, through podcasts and things like that, to help the church, help them realize that it starts with us men. We have to really buckle down on, one, making sure we love and cherish women as God commands us to. And two, when we do find young people or people in a situation that now there is a child, we need to have resources. We need to be ready to just wrap them in our arms and give them a way out. I do think it's good to tell people that abortion is wrong. Abortion is not God's plan. In fact, it's way on the other side. But also, we need to have something in place where when people find themselves in that situation, that and they really would like to carry through, that we need to come alongside them and help them.
Well, Dustin, my wife and I have a pro-life pregnancy center, and two things in regards to what you mentioned. Number one, I believe it's 80% of women or 85% of all women that see an ultrasound and see the heartbeat will choose life. And the other big statistic is 75% of all women that they have the father of the child's support will say yes as well. Wow. So I couldn't agree with you more on your message. I think it's so awesome about you sharing your testimony, your story, and also just helping other men come along their journey. So thank you so much, Dustin, for your time here and for your ministry, and we pray God's greatest blessing upon all that you do.
Amen. Thank you so much for having me. Lord bless you as well.
Coming up next, can you disagree with someone passionately and still love them deeply? Our next guest says not only can you, you must. He's a black belt in conflict resolution, literally, and he's helping Christians fight the right battles the right way. Dr. Tim Muehlhoff joins us after the break. Don't go anywhere.
None of us knows how long we have on this earth. What if we intentionally view each today as a gift from God? What if we considered today as a verb, an action that we can use right now? In my book, Today is a Verb, Open the Gift of Now in Every Ordinary Moment, I encourage my readers to grab hold of God's endless gift of time and make the most of every moment. We can choose each day to pray, to serve, to hope, to overcome. The possibilities are endless. Today is a Verb can be read as a 30-day devotional or as a way to revolutionize your life. Request your copy when you give this month to Cornerstone Television by calling 888-665-4483 or donate online at ctvn.org/donate.
Welcome back to Unscripted Faith. Our next guest is the kind of guy who can diffuse a heated argument and teach you a kung fu move while he's at it. Dr. Tim Muehlhoff is a communication professor, author, and co-director of the Win Some Conviction Project, where he's on a mission to help us disagree better without dividing the church. Dr. Muehlhoff, it's great to have you with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, wait, we have to get to this. But kung fu. Wait, you know kung fu? Tell us how you came into that.
Well, I grew up in a non-Christian house, so the only thing that would get me in a church would be karate. So there was a man who had a ministry called Michael Crane's Karate for Christ. I love that. Jiu-jitsu for Jesus. I think that's awesome. And I became a Christian at age 13, and then I set aside karate, did other things. And so 7 years ago, I decided I wanted to go back and get my black belt. So I have a black belt in Kung Fu to teach basically women how to defend themselves at local domestic violence shelters.
Well, quick question for you in regards to your whole thing is all conflict resolution. It's funny, you specialize in fighting, but yet and still your whole mission is de-escalation, disagreement, all those type of things, how to deal with that. Where did that passion come from? Like, what happened in your background that became the forefront of your ministry?
Well, when I became a Christian, at age 13, I started to share Christ with everybody on the football team, the wrestling team. And I realized that people had really strong negative reactions towards Christians. And I tried to figure out why is there such a strong reaction against the Jesus that I fell in love with? So instead of getting alienated on the football team, get alienated on the wrestling team, how could we find commonality and have differences of opinion, but still be, people that are on the same football team, that want the wrestling team to do really well. So I think that team aspect was grilled into me, that we can have disagreements, but is it possible still to be a successful football team? Now, obviously, that's translated into our communities. Can local communities have a difference of opinion when it comes to abortion, or it comes to issues of race, or even how we vote? But can we still do neighbor love? In spite of our differences, can we still do the second great commandment? And can Christians lead the charge in loving those people that we disagree with?
So that is the big question, Dr. Muehlhoff. Can we do that? And if so, how do we do that when everything causes conflict in this culture war right now?
Well, I think there's two definitions of communication. We've forgotten that there's two. One is what we call the content view. Those are my deepest beliefs. That would be what I think about the election, what I think about mask mandates, what I think about the nature of marriage. That's our content. But there's another aspect of communication called the relational level, and that is the amount of respect between two individuals, the amount of compassion, and do I acknowledge your perspective? Now, we get that in the scriptures, right? In 1 Peter, Peter says this: I want you to be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you. That's content. But then notice he says, with all gentleness and reverence. Paul has his own version. I want you to speak truth. That's content. But I want you to do it in love. That's the relational. I think today in America, my personal opinion, we're all about content. Like, how did you vote in the previous election? What do you think about critical race theory? What do you think about the trans community? And that's fine to have that conversation. But if we don't establish the relational first, that I care about you, I respect you, I love you, then the content honestly doesn't matter. And it gets us off on the wrong foot. We have to first establish the relational. And that is what the early church did. In times of crisis, they helped everybody. It didn't matter if you were loyal to the king, the emperor. Christians helped everybody. Paul would say, when your enemy's hungry, I want you to feed them. I don't care if they're your enemy. I want you to take care of basic needs. And I kind of think we've forgotten that as the church.
You know, Doctor, I have a kind of a curveball question as you're talking. It's kind of spurring some thoughts in my mind. You know, we live in a generation now where everything's about love, and love is now taken on the connotation of acceptance. That means I got to accept everything. What is your message to the church or to people where we're dealing with transgender, we're dealing with marriage, we're dealing with all these types of things that are going on? How do we share it but still walk in love but still get our point across? What is your message concerning that?
Well, that's the fine dance that we need to do today. And somehow the ancient church was able to do that. I mean, the church at Ephesus, right? They lived under the shadow of Artemis, this pagan god. And somehow they were able to love people who loved a pagan god and speak the truth and not compromise. So I agree with what you're saying. If by love you mean I have to accept everything about you and I can never speak my truth, that's not a flourishing relationship. But notice we just went into content. Like, a definition of love is well worth having that conversation. But what we've learned with the Winsome Conviction Project, if we don't establish the love first, if we don't establish neighbor love first, then people do not care what our perspective is. Yeah. And I think we first need to say, listen, we're neighbors. We care about each other. I'm there for you regardless of your sexual orientation, regardless of how you voted, I'm here for you. And as we do neighbor things, I get to speak my truth into your life, which is, for me, I'm an evangelical Christian. And so I do have a lot of opinions on the nature of marriage, the nature of being pro-life. But those are complex conversations that are going to have to exist within a certain kind of communication climate.
That is so good. So let me ask you, Kung Fu fighter, okay? I meet someone on the street, or better yet, what I see a lot of times on social media, people we don't know, but everybody's coming at everybody's throats, okay? And someone comes at my throat and creates conflict with me. In that moment that I have no relational equity with them, how can I de-escalate that moment?
Awesome question. And when I work with corporations, that's exactly what we deal with. Because if you think of a manager who has no relationship with an upset customer. So let me borrow a little bit from John Gottman. He's one of the top relational experts in the world. Gottman says the first 30 seconds of a conversation sets the tone for the entire conversation.
Wow.
So that very first word out of your mouth can either escalate or de-escalate. So we know from studies when we actually have people have arguments, but they don't know one person has been trained on what not to say. So we pick certain words to see if it escalates or de-escalates. So guess what is the number one phrase that escalates a situation in a negative way? What would you think is the number one thing I can say to you that is just really going to trip your wires?
You need to calm down.
Yes.
I knew it. I knew it.
And isn't it crazy how often that comes out of your mouth?
Yes.
Like the first word is, hey, calm down or relax.
Yes.
And we just know that is that spurs it on. So a better response would be, hey, tell me more about what's upsetting you. And then I set aside my perspective long enough to step into your perspective and see how you have framed the world. So can I give you an interesting thing that just happened to me recently?
Yes, please.
So I'm at a conference. I'm wearing my lanyard, Biola, Bible Institute of Los Angeles. Now, there's people all over religiously, politically. So we're having these speed conversations, which is kind of silly, 5-minute conversations. So I sit down with an individual. He looks at my lanyard and he says this, I'm tempted not even to have a conversation with you. I'm like, why? He goes, my 6-year-old daughter is transitioning. And I know Biola University. I know what you guys believe. Here's what you believe. This, 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 and this. And I'm like, by golly, you just nailed all 6 of what I would say to you, right? So what are we going to do at that point? Do we jump into content, or do I step back? And I was praying like crazy the entire time. And I said, well, tell me more about what it's like to be the parent of a child who feels like they're in the wrong body. Like your girl feels like I'm a boy. Wow. Tell me more about that. And so he did. And again, we have 5 minutes. Now we're down to like, I don't know, less than 2 minutes. So I closed with this. I said, listen, I have 3 boys. I want to be the best parent possible. I think you want to be the best parent possible as well. So if you want to continue this conversation, here's my card, because 5 minutes is too short to address this topic. So guess what? He went away. I didn't hear from him for 6 months. Then I get an email and he goes, listen, I have never forgotten how you ended that conversation. That a professor from the Bible Institute of Los Angeles would commend me for trying to be a good parent. I'm now willing to talk. And so now we're in the conversation, the content, but if I would have just jumped in and reiterated those 6 points, the conversation would have ended. We never would have went further. So it wasn't that I was setting aside truth, but remember what the book of Proverbs says, a word spoken in the right circumstance is compared to fine jewelry. I think that was the wrong place for me to reiterate truth that I knew he would disagree with.
Wow. I mean, that is wisdom. Dr. Muehlhoff, thank you so much for all of your kung fu fighting and de-escalating and training us, being our Mr. Miyagi. You know, we really appreciate your ministry, and please continue doing what you're doing. We need it. The church needs it so we can be a whole body. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Wow. After the break, we'll share our final thoughts on today's powerful conversations we had with Dustin Garrett and Dr. Tim Muehlhoff, two men from very different paths, both pointing us to healing, redemption, and real hope. Don't go anywhere.
This week on Sister to Sister, we are going to liven it up with biblical submission versus modern equality.
Amy, you said that S word. Now I have anxiety, depression, burnout. What do I do?
Don't submit to it, that's for sure. This week on Sister to Sister.
Diane knew her next rent payment was looming. Money was tight and she wasn't sure how she was going to make the month's payment. She called CTVN for prayer, and a few days later, she called back to say God had given her the means to pay her rent. Philippians 4:19 says, "This same God who takes care of me will supply all your needs from his glorious riches, which have been given to us in Christ Jesus." I'm Anna Schmidt, and this is Good News.
What powerful conversations we've had here today, Jay. And I just think about, I love what Dr. Muehlhoff just said about relational kind of preceding the content. And we do get that so backwards, I think, especially in today's culture, because everything's so hurry up. So you have those 5-minute conversations on social media without any relationship. And where does it get us? It gets us stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I think that whole thing going back to people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yes.
You know, you look at Dustin's story, went through all the different things. I mean, when you just hit someone over the head, say abortion is wrong, you're going to hell, this, that, and the other, but finding out about their story. Even Dustin, I mean, look at all the things that he went through dealing with addiction, a girlfriend that ODs, you're dealing with all these different struggles. We have to reach people with the love of God. And then when we do that, it opens up their hearts to be able to receive, realizing that they're loved. And that's what the gospel message is all about, love.
Always. And I think about that too with Dustin. What would have happened if someone would have opened up his heart a little bit earlier, been relational with them, looked past the heroin addiction and said, hey, bud, like what's really going on inside of you? And met them with the love of Christ. It would have changed everything, because it's changed everything for you and I.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that love is just so important. And I've realized whether it's in marriage, whether it's in the church, you know, I like what he said about how many times you'll have somebody that is that first, what do you say, 30 seconds of the relationship, and that conversation determines where they're going to go. So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, today the moral of the story, the moral of the script is to really walk in love. When we walk in love, it opens people up, and when they know how much we care about them, they will see the love of Christ and be open to his word and to his gospel.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.